Good morning, everybody. My name is John A. Marshall. I've been a resident of Amherst since 2001.
All right, so we'll move into the virtual audience now. 1 second, please. So we'll start with Diane, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Diane Pierce. I've been a Loyalist Township and been a Loyalist Township resident for over 50 years. I'm happy to be on this committee.
We'll just move through the virtual audience, so whoever wants to go next to introduce themselves.
Hello, I'm Karen. I've been a permanent resident of Amherst Island since 2020. Very happy to be here as well.
Mike Buderick, Councillor Ward 3, representing council on this committee. I've been a resident for over 50 years as well.
Carl Parks, I'm Councillor for Ward 2, Village Bath. I've been a resident probably for about 40 years, roughly, of Loyalist Township, mostly in the Village of Bath, some in Amherst. Excuse me. I've been on this committee previously, so I look forward to continuing our work.
And good morning, everyone. This is Anne. I'm the municipal clerk. I'm just going to be joining virtually to support Gillian in her new role. And welcome everyone to the committee.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone, for introducing yourselves. So we'll move on to the next item here, which is confirmation of the agenda. So the recommendation is that the agenda of the May 27th, 2024 meeting of the Community Grant Committee be confirmed as circulated. And I'll now look for a mover and seconder.
I'll move the motion.
I'll second it.
And then all in favor? Next, we will move on to disclosure of pecuniary interest. So if there's anyone here who has a disclosure for pecuniary interest, now would be the time to disclose. So hearing none, we'll move on to the next item, which is receipt of minutes. It's recommended that the minutes of the March 18th, 2024 meeting of the Renewable Energy Fund Grant Review Committee, Ward 2 and 3 subcommittee be received. So again, can I get a mover and seconder? Perfect.
I'll move Carol Parks.
And then all in favor? And then the next item is under the same for receipt of minutes is the resolution would be, it is recommended that the minutes of the March 19th, 2024 meeting of the Renewable Energy Fund Grant Review Committee, Ward 1 subcommittee be received. Again, can I get a mover and a seconder?
I'll move that.
Diane. And then all in favor. So the next item here on our agenda is presentations. So first we'll have a presentation from Jenna Campbell, the Director of Corporate Services, Strategy and Innovation regarding the community grant policy.
Hey, thank you, Gillian.
So as Gillian said, my name is Jenna Campbell. I'm the Director of Corporate Services, Strategy and Innovation here at the Township. The purpose of this presentation today is to give an overview of the new community grants policy for the committee. So I'll discuss each of the grant streams, including the associated eligibility and requirements. And I want to thank each of you for participating as a member of this committee, where you have the significant and consequential task of making recommendations to council as to whether a grant application should be approved. So the Loyalist Township Community Grants Policy. So the program supports community groups and others that provide programs or projects to support health, social, cultural, economic, equity, and environmental aspects of the community in Loyalist Township. The new policy, called the Community Grants Policy, was approved on May 14th, 2024, and combines the former Renewable Energy Vibrancy Grant Fund policy, the Council Ad Hoc Grant Policy, the Free Use of Facilities Program, and the Mayor and CAO discretionary funds into one single policy. The policy combines a variety of direction and feedback into one document, including the requirements of the community vibrancy and community benefit agreements entered into with 2 renewable energy proponents. Initial work undertaken by the Renewable Energy Vibrancy Fund Advisory Committee and recommendations from its subcommittees. Public consultation by way of a survey undertaken in March and April of this year, and direction from council. The policy as drafted is meant to provide clarity, improve consistency in the way funds are distributed, and ensure appropriate recognition of the contributors, as well as to simplify the application and reporting requirements for our community groups who end up being recipients. Sorry, can you just go back one? Oh, go back one more. Sorry. Yeah, right here. Okay. So the township entered into a community benefit fund agreement with Wind Electric Inc. in 2015. This was resulting from the wind project on Amherst Island, as well as a community vibrancy fund agreement with Kingston Solar GP Inc. in 2014, which was resulting from the solar project on Mud Lake Road, which is partially included in the town, partially constructed in the township and partially constructed within the city of Kingston. Each funding agreement provides stipulations based on base contribution each year, how the funding must be allocated, and the maintenance of a designated reserve fund. Currently, the annual contributions from both agreements yield approximately $645,000 per year in funding, which in turn is distributed to organizations and individuals who make a meaningful difference in the lives of Loyalist Township residents. Both agreements are for a period of 20 years, after which the contributions will cease. Next slide. So the new policy includes 4 grant streams. There is initial information within the policy body, and then each of the 4 grant stream details are included in the appendices of the policy. So the first 2 streams, the capital grant stream and the program and event stream, applications are considered by this committee, which will make a recommendation to council for final decision, and these will be the focus of today's presentation. Under these 2 streams, applicants are only entitled to 1 community grant from either the capital stream or the program and event stream per year. The other 2 streams, so the free use of facility requests, are considered by the Director of Community and Customer Services, and discretionary grant requests are considered by the Mayor or CAO. Requests for free use of facilities are limited to $1,500 per request, and discretionary grants are limited to $1,000 per request, which means any requests above those dollar values will need to be made to this committee. Per the policy, of the total contributions received in each year, 25% is placed into a reserve to be used in perpetuity following the completion of the agreements, so after the agreements have been in place for 20 years. 60% is placed in the capital grant stream, and the remaining 15% of the funds are for the program, event, free use, and discretionary streams.
Some funds are also dedicated to certain areas of the township based on the policy and where the construction of the renewable energy project was done. And we'll discuss that during the financial presentation later on in the meeting. Okay, next slide. So the requirements for all applicants, in addition to the specific requirements under each stream that are included in the appendices, so the all applicant requirements are included on this slide and are detailed in paragraph 4.16 of the policy. So projects, programs, events, or activities must support township residents and or be located within the township and generally be open to the public. Applicants must have a good track record of completing similar programs, demonstrate the financial ability to carry out the program or project, and be in good financial standing with the township. This includes fulfilling reporting requirements from previous grant or donation programs. So when you're considering applications in the future, you need to ensure that those requirements have been adhered to in the past. Next slide, please. So the specific information about the capital grant stream. So as I said, the details for this stream are in Appendix A of the policy. These are for projects that are often physical in nature, that enhance or enrich the community. They involve construction or the purchase of physical assets. And they must fall under one of the seven categories that are listed on the slide there. Next slide. So for the capital grant stream, applicants must be incorporated organizations that are nonprofit or charitable in nature. They are to be validly subsisting and in good standing and have demonstrated support from sources other than public funds. And they must demonstrate an appropriate organizational structure and volunteer support and have a good track record of implementing projects, programs, or events similar to what they're applying for. Individuals and unincorporated groups are not eligible to apply for the capital stream. The limit for applications under the capital grant stream is $100,000 per application. And the complete application must include 3 quotes to support the pricing in the application. The $100,000 limit also includes any in-kind services from the township that are being requested. And these need to be confirmed with township staff before they are detailed in the application. So the scope and the cost associated with those items must be confirmed with township staff ahead of being included. For all projects where physical construction is proposed, the applicant must consult with the township's Development Services Division as part of the application process. So this will be done to help determine any requirements under the Planning Act or Ontario Building Code that should be included as part of the application. So that might be items such as building permit requirements, site plan control requirements, or other similar requirements. Applications under the capital grant stream also require the submission of a copy of the organization's financial statements, corporate annual return, a list of the organization's directors and officers, and a copy of the organization's articles of incorporation, as well as proof of insurance. So there are 3 intakes for both the capital grant and the program and event grant. So they will be deadlines of February 1st, June 1st, and October 1st in every year but this year. In 2024, the deadline for intake 2 is June 12th of this year. Successful applicants, so recipients under this program, will have to enter into a formal funding agreement with the township before the funding is released. And for the capital stream, 50% of the funding will be granted upon agreement signing, and then recipients will be required to make claims for the remaining funds, and the claims must be at least 10% of the total project value for each claim. So they would get 50% upfront, and then they could make up to 5 additional claims of 10% each or more for the remaining funds. All permits and approvals required to facilitate the project remain the responsibility of the recipient. Reporting requirements as detailed above are required for all projects. And as I noted before, we noted these specifically because the committee needs to be aware that if the reporting is not finalized on a previous project, then applicants would be ineligible in the future. For the program and event stream. So the details for this stream are in Appendix B of the policy. This is for programs or events or activities being offered that enhance or enrich the community and must fall into one of the categories listed on the slide. So for the program and event stream, applicants can be nonprofit or charitable in nature, and they can be incorporated organizations or unincorporated groups. And similarly, need to have demonstrated support from other sources other than public funds, demonstrate appropriate organizational structure and support, and have a good track record of implementing these types of projects. Individuals are not eligible to apply under the program and event stream. The limit for applications is $10,000 per application, and the application requirements are substantially less involved than for the capital grant stream, and involve information about the group that's applying, as well as the intended project outcomes and the financial need for the grant. Again, there are 3 intakes. They follow the same timelines as the capital stream. And recipients of the program and event stream must enter into a memorandum of understanding with the township, so a bit of a simpler document before the funding is released. It's released as a one-time payment after the MOU signing, and all permits required to facilitate the program or event remain the responsibility of the recipient. So for this case, it might be a park permit or something like that that's required. Reporting requirements are as detailed above. And again, just noted to make sure that we have all future applicants being eligible after submitting this reporting. There are a variety of limitations as detailed in paragraph 4.18 of the policy and listed on this slide that will need to be considered by the committee when reviewing applications. So these include considerations for making sure that the applicant is not using the funds for-profit purposes or to fund projects taking place on private property that is not accessible to the community at large. Grants are not to be used for political, special interest, or religious purposes, nor are they to be used as a loan or for debt financing. They're also not to be for day-to-day operation costs, such as staffing, rent, taxes, office supplies, attendance at conferences or workshops, travel, accommodations, uniforms, or personal protective equipment. And they're also not to be used to fund third parties or donations to other charitable causes. Next slide. So there are a number of other conditions for the committee's consideration that are listed on this slide. All of these are detailed in the policy, and the policy should be reviewed in detail by each committee member ahead of the first meeting where you're considering applications. Specific new conditions in this policy is the recognition protocol, which is currently being developed and will be shared with committee members once it's finalized. And that's to make sure that the requirements of the agreements for acknowledging our contributors and the township are met by those receiving grants. So the approval process. So once an application is submitted, it will be included on a community grant committee agenda, along with any staff comments on the application. The specific responsibilities of the committee are to review complete applications to the capital grant and program and event grant streams and assess them in accordance with the stream's respective guidelines as outlined in the policy body, as well as appendices A and B. The community grant committee as established, will operate in accordance with the terms of reference as provided by council, and Gillian will speak to this in a few minutes. And it is very important that decisions about all funding allocations for the two streams for which you're responsible be recommended by the Community Grant Committee only in accordance with the relevant program guidelines included in the policy. So the committee will make a recommendation to council for each application for which the committee is responsible to consider. Council will then consider the committee recommendations at the next available council meeting, and council decisions regarding applications are final. Following approval, the administration process moves to staff to inform applicants of the status of their application, to sign the funding agreement, to sign the funding agreement for capital grants or memorandum of understanding for program and event grants, and to issue payments. So a few grant writing tips and tricks listed up here on the slide. So these can be helpful for successful grants. So if you have any questions from community members, these are good tips to provide them. And anyone looking for support for the application process is welcome to reach out to the Clerk's division. We have their email coming up in a minute for consultation or support on their application. And we would encourage anyone to do that, especially with the new policy as people are navigating what's changed. So here are some of the staff details for some of the consultation. So as I said, if anyone would like to contact the Clerk's division to consult on their proposal, that's the email there for them. And then for the mandatory consultation for physical construction, the planning and building department can be reached at planningandbuilding@loyalist.ca. And I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has about the presentation. Gillian will be doing a bit of a presentation about committee procedure in a moment. Yes, Councillor Willis.
Thank you. One question I have is, I know that the policy does allow some leeway with that $100,000 cap for capital, that council could approve higher if it was appropriate. But what you said is the committee must make a decision based on the policy alone. So in that kind of a case, the committee would recommend not approving because it doesn't meet the policy, and then it would go to council for a decision.
And to what extent can the committee rely on the screening done by staff before we see the applications?
Comments. Either if or concerns process or tools or processes that the township has in place. They won't provide committee to what the how application.
Okay, thank you very much.
If you have a question, Diane, you're welcome to ask.
I do. First of all, I couldn't hear the response. I don't know if it's only my connection, but it totally broke up. There was I couldn't hear the answer to either of those questions, any of those questions. I also will mention, well, I have the opportunity. I intended to be there in person until I reviewed the agenda again this morning and got the definite impression that it was a virtual meeting only. And as I said, I would much prefer to be there in person for things like this. Although I appreciate the value of and the convenience of having a hybrid meeting. Anyway, I just want to know if I was confused or if it was unclear about whether this meeting would be hybrid only, or whether, would be virtual only, online only, or whether it would be partially in person.
Anne, it looks like you want to answer that question.
I can speak to that also. When I read the initial email, I thought it was virtual only, but I inquired and was told it's in person. Because I thought earlier I saw it in person. Oops. When I first read it, I thought it was in person. Then the second email, so it was just a little bit of confusion. I just contacted you and cleared it up.
Through Gillian to Diane's question. So the committee meetings are hybrid, which means that you could attend in person or virtually. I know the reason we do this is to give everyone the sort of the convenience to attend in person or virtually if that's what they want to do. So I'm sorry that there was a bit of confusion on whether this meeting was officially virtual or in person, but you guys are you are welcome to attend whichever method you prefer.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you to the clerk for that. I think that the confusion comes from the fact that in the agenda, it says that it will be a virtual manner and it doesn't mention hybrid. So if we can just correct that for future meetings.
Yeah, of course, we'll take note of that and we'll update it so that all further meetings will be held in a hybrid manner.
Perhaps I might try to answer the questions again so that those attending virtually might be able to hear. So I see nodding. Can everyone hear now? Okay. So I now need to remember what the questions were. So one was about the role of staff in reviewing the applications. So the role of staff is to provide factual commentary on the how the application aligns with the policy and also on any other operational requirements that may be impacted or may need to be considered as a result of the application, so that the applicant is aware of all of those requirements before the committee is aware of all of those requirements before considering the application. The other question was from Councillor Willis, which is escaping me. Okay.
I was asking because the capital grant policy has a cap of $100,000, but there is some leeway for council to make alternate decisions, whether the committee is held to recommending against that application because it doesn't meet the policy. Essentially, the committee can only work with what is the policy, correct?
Okay, so just checking again that everyone can hear me. Yes, so the consideration by the committee should be looking to align with the policy wherever possible, yes.
Yes, Diane?
So then, even though the committee might think the application is a very good idea and beneficial to the community, the recommendation would then be, maybe it would be conditional. You know, we think this is a good idea, but we understand that it's beyond the mandate of the committee to recommend it. Is that what would be suggested?
It certainly could be. So the committee should make whatever recommendation the majority of the committee deems to be appropriate. We just would encourage the committee to do their best to align their recommendations with the policy, as long as they feel that that's appropriate. Well, they should aim to align with the policy wherever possible.
Are there any further questions? Seeing none, I'm now going to call out the motion. So it reads that the presentation from Jenna Campbell, Director of Corporate Services, Strategy and Innovation regarding the new community grant policy be received, and I'll look for a mover and a seconder. And a seconder? And all in favor? Yeah. So it was moved by Bert Herbst and seconded by John Marshall. So moving on to the next item, it'll be a presentation on procedures and best practices in regards to committees and council. So this is a procedural and best practices presentation for the Community Grant Committee. So first of all, we'll just talk about where the authority for the committee comes from. So it begins at the Constitution Act. And then we also get the powers from the federal and provincial government. And then moving forward, there's some specific provincial legislation, such as the Municipal Act, the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, and the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. And lastly, we also get powers from municipal bylaws, which are passed by each municipality. It's important to note that both provincial and municipal legislation are mandatory and permissive. So that's meaning that the word shall is used if it's something that's mandatory, and the word may is used in a permissive language. So moving on to some legislative context of decision making. So local government is first off open and transparent, has predictable meetings with a predictable subject matter. That's why we have agendas that go out ahead of schedule, so that the public is aware of what will be discussed. We have fixed election dates, as well as meetings are open to the public. And there's special proceedings for property rights, and everything must be accessible.
Sorry, can we advance the slides? I'm still seeing the first slide.
I'm just going to update the presentation to ensure you can all see the slides moving. For virtual members, can you just let me know if you're able to see the slides moving now? Okay, just let me try that again.
Gillian, this is Anne. Once you share your screen, there should be a drop-down setting where you could either duplicate your view or choose a master view. And I think you're supposed to have clicked the duplicate your view. So that it shows the same screen that you would be seeing on your laptop.
Thank you, Anne. Can the virtual members just confirm that they can see the slides moving?
Yep.
Thank you. So the next portion is municipal authority. So council establishes committees, boards, and advisory boards. So currently, the township has a joint accessibility advisory committee, which is mandatory based on population. There's also a heritage advisory committee, which is discretionary and is based on the Planning Act. And we also have a committee of adjustment, which is also discretionary and is based off of the zoning bylaw for the municipality. There's also an appeals committee, which is mandatory based on the Ontario Building Code. And we also have the W.J. Henderson Recreation Center Renewal Fundraising Committee, which is also discretionary. And then our committee here today, the Community Grant Committee, which is also discretionary. And lastly, we have the OPP Detachment Board, which is mandatory under the Police Services Act. Moving on to municipal bylaws. So the municipality enacts laws by passing bylaws. And bylaws may not contradict provincial legislation. And they are there to dictate our processes. So some examples would be like the provincial legislation examples that might dictate municipal bylaws would be the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act as it applies to members. Same with the Municipal Code of Conduct for members also applies. And there must also be a procedural bylaw for all council and committees, along with going with notice to the public of all meetings and having them open to the public to observe. All meetings must have minutes to be kept for the public to review, and all voting must be done in open. The Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. So members of committees are subject to the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, concerned only with pecuniary interest, so financial or economic interest. So there's two different types, so direct or indirect. So direct would be you, the member, spouse, parent, or child that might have a pecuniary interest in a matter in which council or in the specific interest the community grant committee is concerned with. So that could be a grant application or somebody looking, like if you're reviewing a grant application that relates to this. And then indirect would be if you have a pecuniary interest in regards to an employer of a member, spouse, parent, or child, a partner of a member, spouse, parent, or child, or a body to which the member, spouse, parent, or child belongs. Again, with private corporations of which the member, spouse, parent, or child is a shareholder, director, or senior officer. And then lastly, publicly traded company that a member, spouse, parent, or child controls, or which is a director or senior officer. If you have any questions about this, especially as you meet to discuss the intake of applications, please definitely reach out to the clerk's department. So here's just some steps.
Gillian, do you mind if I just, if you go back to the previous slide?
Yeah,
I could just provide some context to the committee members. So committee, this is really talking about your private interests conflicting with the interests of your public appointment to this committee. So if those two interests conflict, then you probably have a conflict of interest. So for example, you guys volunteer at an organization that applies for a grant application, and the committee is asked to consider the application, and in that case you would be asked to declare the pecuniary interest and refrain from discussing the matter or voting on the matter when the committee was considering it. The reason that this is in place is because you are recommending decisions for council, and it's really important to consider how your appointment would affect your private interest. So there is a very clear legislation that applies to committee members and council members. And if you do have questions about upcoming applications and whether or not you should declare, you could reach out to the clerk's office. However, I won't be, or the clerk's office won't be able to give you a definite answer on whether or not you should declare. That is something that you have to decide on as a committee member. We do have an integrity commissioner on retainer who can provide you some advice if that's something that you'd like to do. So please reach out to us if you see something on the agenda that you think you may have to declare pecuniary interest on. And usually it happens. So in today's committee agenda, it was the section number 4. there's no items on the agenda that you're actually making decisions on. It's mostly just to receive presentations and receive minutes. But for the June 20, I forget when the next meeting date is, but for the next meeting, you'll probably have to double check the agenda to make sure that there are no conflicts. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. So in regards to what to do when you do have a pecuniary interest, so you'll file a written statement with the clerk, and you have to disclose the interest prior to consideration, so that it can be recorded in the minutes, so that everyone is aware. And you won't be able to take part in the discussion or the vote. And then, so on that note, so before, during, or after, do not attempt to influence anyone's voting if you do have a pecuniary interest. If the meeting is enclosed, we would ask that you leave the meeting. And also, if you're attending virtually and you have a pecuniary interest, we would ask that you turn your mic and camera off, just so you're not included in that conversation. And then if you're absent from a meeting that you have a pecuniary interest for, we ask that you disclose the conflict at the first meeting that you would be present at after that one. So we definitely recommend that you take time to learn about the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act and how it might affect you. And if you have questions about this process, again, you can reach out to the clerk or our integrity commissioner. And I'll also note that the clerk's division posts all declarations on the website for public access. Yes, of course. Lorna? Yeah.
Just for clarity, please.
Yeah, of course.
So pecuniary is, I have a direct financial or economic benefit.
Correct.
So if I or my spouse is a member of the Lions Club, I don't receive any money from the Lions Club. Would I have to declare an interest because I'm a member of that club and not be able to look at their application?
I'll get Anne, the clerk, just to clarify that, just to make sure that the information is being provided in the best light.
Through Gillian to Councillor Willis's question, I really can't answer that right now. I can't give you a definite answer because I would not be able to give you advice, for one, and two, I don't know what your membership includes and what your benefits would be. So this is the type of questions that you could ask the integrity commissioner. But yes, you're right. The Conflict of Interest Act is only concerned about your financial or economic interest. But what that would mean in terms of the benefit that you would get from sitting as a member of this committee or sitting as a member of the organization, I won't be able to answer that.
Please go ahead, Councillor Willis.
Thank you. Through Gillian to the clerk again. Would it be possible to ask that question of the integrity commissioner in a broad sense? Because I'm just looking at our committee and I think that everyone is a member of some group. So this will come up probably at every intake, and rather than 7 different people calling the integrity commissioner at every intake, I'm wondering if we could get some clarification.
I can do that, Councillor Willis, and then I could share their response with the committee members through an email.
Thank you. So just moving forward, past pecuniary interests, so now into the Code of Conduct. So the Municipal Act of 2001 requires all municipalities in Ontario to establish a code of conduct for members of council and committees. So the council code of conduct is established to provide standards for conduct of members of council and those appointed to local boards and committees in a fair, impartial, transparent, and professional manner. The code of conduct helps to ensure a standard of acceptable behavior and is for those elected or appointed to be held accountable. And all members of council, appointees to local boards and advisory committees are required to follow the code of conduct while serving in the public capacity. Adherence to these standards within the code of conduct will protect and maintain the municipality's integrity and fairness in its decision-making process. So we encourage you to take time to learn about the code of conduct and how it might affect you. And if you are looking for a copy of it, the clerk's department is happy to send that to you or print you off a copy. And then if you do have any questions about the process that's laid out in that conduct, you can reach out again to the clerk or the integrity commissioner. So some principles of conduct. So members shall serve and be seen to serve the public in a conscientious and diligent manner. Members shall observe and act with the highest standard of ethical conduct and integrity. Members shall avoid the improper use of the influence of their office and act without self-interest. Members shall act and are expected to perform their functions with honesty, integrity, accountability, and transparency. Members shall perform their duties and arrange their private affairs in a manner that promotes public confidence and that will bear close public scrutiny. Members shall be cognizant that they are at all times representatives of the township as a whole and recognize the importance of their duties and responsibilities and take that into account with public character of their function and maintain and promote public trust within the township. And members shall uphold the spirit and the letter of laws of Canada, Ontario, and the laws and policies adopted by council for the municipality. Moving on to the procedural bylaw, which is a bylaw put forward by the municipality. The Municipal Act requires municipalities to pass a procedural bylaw for governing the calling, place, and proceedings of meetings. So the procedural bylaw governs the way council, boards, and committees such as yourselves, how the meetings are held and run. This includes rules of how meetings are called, who would be involved, and where they happen, and how they would proceed. It guides how residents engage with the committees and how they get involved in the decision-making process. It also outlines a fair and consistent approach with respect to the consideration of the township's business, and it establishes standards in relations to the notice of provisions, agendas and minutes, resolutions and voting, and the council and committee structure and memberships and appointments. So in regards to what a meeting is, as laid out in our procedural bylaw, a meeting means any regular, special, or other meeting of a council, of a local board, or of a committee where A, a quorum of members is present, and B, members discuss or otherwise deal with any matter in a way that material advances the business or decision-making of the council, local board, or committee. So in this note, you must have both A and B for it to be considered a meeting. So closed session. So as provided in section 239 of the except as provided in the section 239 of the Municipal Act, all meetings shall be open to the public. A meeting or part of a meeting may be closed to the public if a subject matter being considered is related to the security of a property, personal matters about an identifiable individual, potential litigation, labor relations, etc. There's a few more that will be listed out in the Municipal Act. And then for closed sessions, the committee is initiated by the clerk and is described in the agenda, so the public is aware that there will be a matter discussed in closed. And no member of the committee shall disclose or discuss to any individual or third party any information that has or will be discussed in that closed session. So just some general information in regards to meetings. So all committee meetings are open to the public unless there is a matter that needs to be held in closed, as just previously discussed. All committee meetings are streamed live on the township's YouTube channel for the public to view. You can find out when any other meetings are scheduled if you visit the agenda and minutes page on the township's website. Will redirect you to the Civic Web where that is all found. And then for specific committee members, you'll receive an email once the agenda has been published. And agendas are published 5 days in advance of the regular meeting date. And committees provide recommendations through motions. And then minutes are recorded by the designated staff, and they are the official record of the proceedings. And then all minutes will be approved at the next regular meeting. So for this specific committee, these minutes will be brought to, the minutes from today will be brought to the next meeting in June. Some general rules. So to start all meetings at scheduled time, as long as quorum is achieved, and as long as all members are here for the Community Grant Committee, quorum is 5, as long as all 9 members are present. So no quorum equals no meeting. If you're unable to attend, please let the clerk or the chair of the committee, once established, know. The agenda is a key document assembled by the clerk, so avoid adding any items at the meeting. But if you do have agenda items that you would like to be brought to the meeting, let the clerk and chair know ahead of time so that they can be attached to the agenda before it's published 5 days in advance of that scheduled meeting. Committees cannot exceed the boundaries of their mandates in the terms of reference. It's important to note the chair is the conductor of the orchestra, not the lead musician. So the chair facilitates the meeting and ensures meeting procedure is followed. If the chair would like to make a motion, they have to vacate the chair seat and allow someone else to facilitate the meeting while they bring forward that motion. We ask that you be prepared for each meeting and vote on motions by raising your hands. And then if you do have any questions or concerns about procedures, you can always ask the clerk's division staff. Some general do nots that we have. So do not use offensive or unparliamentary language. Do not deviate from the subject being discussed. Do not criticize decisions of council or decisions of federal or provincial governments. Do not disobey the rules. Do not disclose confidential information or display offensive or partisan material. And do not meet to consider matters prior to the meeting. So do not discuss items with all members through or via email. So that we ask that you don't have like a group email where you emailed each other, because that would be considered a closed session. Or if you all meet outside of here, that's also considered a closed session. So we ask that that does not occur. But if you do have any questions, again, we can clarify that in the future as well. Some information regarding meeting preparation. So before the meeting, if you know you're going to be absent for that meeting date, please let the clerk and the chair of the committee know. Once the agenda is published, please review the agenda so you're aware of the contents that will be discussed at the meeting. We ask that you come prepared with any questions. And during the meeting, we ask that you all actively participate in discussion and decision-making process, vote on motions, and ask questions of staff and other members, and please maintain decorum and follow the chair's ruling. After the meeting, we'd ask that you review the minutes from the previous meeting. And then in regards to take action, that's more so for staff follow-up afterwards. But you'd be notified if there's any other action to be taken. In regards to committee composition for this specific committee, the Community Grant Committee, as set out in your terms of reference, the committee consists of 9 members. So 3 members from the Loyalist Township Council, so 1 from each ward, and then 6 public members, 2 from each ward. A chair and vice chair are also elected at the first meeting of every year, and we will elect a chair and vice chair in today's meeting. Should any member fail to attend 3 successive meetings without being authorized to do so by resolution of the committee may recommend to council that membership be terminated, and the council may appoint another member in their place. So just some information on a chair and vice chair. So a chair is a member of the committee who's responsible for conducting the meeting in an orderly fashion. So there's just some duties included in that is laid out in the procedural bylaw. But it's just in regards to, so the chair will facilitate the discussion, they'll maintain order, and they'll recognize members when they indicate their intent to address the committee. They'll also receive all the motions presented to members. They'll put to vote motions. They'll have ruling on all procedural matters without debate or comment. Declining to put a vote motion does not comply with the rules of our procedures, so ensuring that the motions do follow the procedural bylaw. Restraining members within the rules of order, calling by name any member persisting in breaching the rules of order of the committee. They'll also be there for adjourning and suspending the meeting if they consider it necessary. And they will also remain neutral and not enter into debate or discussion while they're holding chair position. And then just in regards to recruitment and resignations, so all resignations of voting members must be received by the clerk's division. Recruitment for all voting members for all committees and boards is conducted by the clerk's division. So as of right now, there are no vacant positions on this committee at this time. All seats are taken. And once a recruitment drive is completed, council are the ones who meet to make the appointments. So I can take any questions if there are any questions that anyone has. Diane, yes.
Thank you for your presentation. I have 2 questions or 2 points maybe. Under the closed meeting portion, it's unlikely that would occur with this committee. But my understanding is that if it did occur, there is a duty to disclose the nature of the discussion that occurred, if not the specifics, once it's happened. And I don't think that was mentioned in that slide. The other thing, I'll put out both things at the same time. In terms of adding something to the agenda, you indicated that we shouldn't add something to the agenda. In the past, when the committee has met or after the agenda has come out, the committee has asked to see something like a financial update, and that wasn't included on the agenda. So how should we address those situations if the committee or if a member of the committee does want something added after the agenda comes out?
I'll let the clerk answer that question.
Thank you, Diane, for those 2 points. So with respect to the closed session, yes, you're right. So if there was a need for the committee to move into close, it would be very unlikely, but when you do have to go into close, the clerk's office will publish a closed agenda and an open agenda, and we would ask that the committee indicate the reason that the committee is going into closed, and then the appropriate municipal, the section in the municipal act that gives the committee the authority to go into closed for that matter. And then once the discussion in closed occurs, there would be a follow-up report in open session where the chair would usually provide a summary of the discussion in closed session, or in some cases where the committee would be asked to vote on a matter in open session once they've had the chance to debate in closed. For the second question that you had regarding the additional items, the general rule is that items don't get added to the agenda after the agenda is published. But there might be cases, like you said, where the agenda is published and the committee would like to discuss something. And in those cases, the committee does have the opportunity to add items under what would be section 3 of the agenda, called confirmation of the agenda. So this is where we're asking as staff for the committee to confirm that this is the items that you'd like to discuss at the meeting. And if you'd like to add or delete items, that's your opportunity to do so. And in that case, you could just say, I'd like to add item about this to the agenda, and then we would ask the committee to confirm the addition. The reason that's generally not encouraged is because, like Gillian mentioned in one of the first couple of slides, local government is the most open and transparent and most accessible. So when committees and councils start adding items on the day of the meeting, it gives the public members and staff members and even other committee members or council members, it doesn't give them enough time to prepare or do some research. So that's one of the reasons that we ask that items don't get added on the agenda on the day of the meeting. But if it does come time to, there are procedures in the procedural bylaw that allow for that.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Anne. And Ken, it looks like you have a question.
Yeah, just a question of clarification. Is the chair allowed to vote? I'm taking particular reference to your last bullet in the duties of the chair. It says remain neutral and not enter into debate or discussion. Remaining neutral is not consistent with casting a vote.
So in regards to that, looks like the clerk will answer that portion as well.
So to Ken's question, the chair remains neutral during the discussion and debate, but they are permitted to vote on motions. One of the reasons that there's an odd number of committee members on committees and council is because the chair is usually the tiebreaker. They don't normally vote or generally vote, but then when they have to, we do ask that the chair vote on matters just to break the tie.
Thank you. And are there any other questions in regards to the procedure of this committee? Seeing none, I will call out the motion. So that is that the presentation from Gillian DeMille, Legislative Coordinator, regarding committee procedures and best practices be received. So I'll be looking for a mover and a seconder. So moved by Councillor Willis.
I second it.
Oh, and seconded by John Marshall. And then all in favor? Carried. So we'll be moving on to the next agenda item, which is open forum. So during open forum, any person may address the committee on any matter that is listed on the agenda. Anyone wishing to speak at a committee meeting can register in advance with the clerk's division at clerk@loyalist.ca, or can use the raise hand in Zoom when called upon by the chair. Each person will have 3 minutes to address the committee. So we'll just be looking, do we have anyone in the virtual audience looking to speak? And it does not look like it. And there's no one here in council chambers today that is wishing to speak. So that will close off open forum. So the next item is delegations, but there are no delegations that are scheduled for today. So we'll move on to item number 9, which is the appointment of chair and vice chair. So before we begin voting, I'll just explain the process a little bit. So in regards to appointing a chair and a vice chair, so at the first meeting of each year, the committee will or shall elect from its members a chair and vice chair for a 1-year term. So the members shall proceed to elect a chair and vice chair in the following manner. So members may nominate a member for chair, or a person can nominate themselves. And upon a member being nominated, the clerk will ask if the nominee wishes to stand or decline the nomination. Each nominee will be permitted to speak to the nomination if they wish. And then once no further nominations have been brought forward, the clerk will close the nomination. So if there's only one nomination that is received, the nominee will be appointed by acclamation. But where there is more than one nomination that is received, a vote shall take place, and we'll follow this same protocol for the chair and vice chair. So with that, we'll start off. So can I have nominations now for the chair of the Community Grant Committee? Go ahead, Diane.
I would like to nominate Councillor Willis, please.
Councillor Willis, would you wish to stand?
I would, thank you.
Do we have any other nominations for chair? Seeing none, I will read out the following motion. So that Councillor Willis be appointed by acclamation as the chair of the Community Grant Committee for 2024. And I'll ask for a mover and seconder.
I move it.
So moved by John Marshall and seconded by Mike Rogers. We'll now move into the nominations for vice chair. So I'm now looking for nominations for vice chair for the committee. Councillor Willis?
I'd like to nominate Councillor Buderick.
Councillor Buderick, do you wish to stand?
No, I like the fact that we've got such a great, vast number of people from across the municipality, and the fact that they're getting involved. I'd love to see someone step forward that is not a council member. Actually, just have a nice, even tandem.
I would nominate Diane Pierce.
Diane, do you wish to stand?
Somewhat reluctantly, I will agree to stand. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. And do we have anyone else with a nomination for vice chair? Seeing none, I'll read out the following motion. So that Diane Pierce be appointed by acclamation as the vice chair of the Community Grant Committee for 2024. And can I get a mover and seconder? So moved by Bert Herbst and seconded by Councillor Parks. And then all in favor of the chair and vice chair motions? Carried. I'll actually now pass the facilitating portion over to the chair of the committee, Councillor Willis.
Item 10.1 is a financial update from the director.
Thank you through the chair. So you're stuck with me today. We are in the middle of our year-end audit for year-end 2023 currently. So I'm going to provide the financial update today, but in the future we will have representatives from our finance department in attendance to do this portion of the presentation. So the financial update is as follows. So I hope everyone has the chart in front of them that is color-coded in green, blue, yellow. So I'll just provide a brief overview of what we're seeing in this chart. So for those of you who have it in paper, you're looking at the bottom section. And for those of you who have it online, it's the chart that is online. So just need to grab my notes here. Sorry. All right. So the first item is the 25% of contributions that are placed into the perpetual reserve fund. So that's at the end of your chart in the yellow section. So the reserve fund currently that is intended to be used into the future is sitting at a balance of 1.226 million. So the intent for that money is that we will continue to be putting money into this reserve fund so that the interest can be used in the future in perpetuity to keep the program running once the contributions from our partners are finished. The next section is there is a portion called the Amherst Island portion, a portion called the Odessa Wilton portion, and a portion called the entire township portion. And within each of those, there's a capital piece and a program and event piece. So how did we get to these numbers? Within the policy in sections 4.11 and 4.12, those clauses identify that the majority of the first 5 years of each contribution agreement are to be used to fund community betterment projects in the community in which the renewable energy project was constructed. So for the solar contributions, this is the area, it's Schedule A of the agreement that we have with the solar company. So the area is bounded by the municipal boundary to the north and east, County Road 4 to the west, and Caton Road to the south. So that is the portion that we've detailed Odessa Wilton. So the first 5 years of solar money between 2015 and 2019 went into this pot. So within that pot, there is $329,000 available for capital and about $69,000 available for the program event stream. So that's the blue section of your chart. Similarly, between 2018 and 2022, those were the first 5 years of the wind electric agreement, and those contributions are dedicated to be spent on Amherst Island. So the total available is in the top line of your chart there, and then less the grants that have been granted between 2022 and 2024 to date, with a remaining balance for capital of $967,000 and a remaining balance for the program event stream of $329,000. So following the first 5 years, then all of the contributions from both agreements go into the entire township pot. So as I noted earlier in the presentation that I gave previously, we receive approximately between $645,000 and $650,000 a year from the two contributions. That's split about 84% from the wind electric agreement and about 16% from the Kingston Solar agreement. So when we split that up, I spoke before about 60% going to capital, 15% going to the program event, and 25% going to the reserve. So in a given year, we can estimate that approximately $390,000 a year will go to capital. Approximately $100,000 a year will go to the program event stream, and approximately $160,000 a year will go into that reserve fund to be used into the future. So moving forward, that's how we expect the contributions to be split up. There's no more money going into either of the initial pots to the initial areas where the construction happened, because both have had their first 5 years go in there. So over time, we've allocated about $980,000 in capital in the entire township portion, and about $52,000 in the program and event stream. You'll notice there's a slight deficit currently shown in the capital column for the entire township area and in yellow there. So that is as a result of how the funds were allocated in the past, and looking at the policy moving forward and making sure that everything aligns with the policy intent. So when this policy went to council, it was noted that deficit can be eliminated, by example, over the next 3 years by not expending 1/3 of the capital allocation. So if we're getting $390,000 a year of capital money into that pot, if we only granted $260,000 of that, then after 3 years, the deficit would be gone. Similarly, if the committee decided to recommend spending a little bit more than that, then it would take a little bit longer to have that deficit, come back to being a positive number. So, Councillor Willis has a question.
Sorry, just for clarification on this. So the policy stipulates that the first 5 years of each of the renewable energy agreements, the funds, are earmarked for the affected communities. So council agreed that a minimum of that first 5 years, or what's 25% say, are for projects in those communities. But this money is still in the bank. So it's very unlikely that the entire amount for either of these project areas is going to be spent in a year. So if there were a project that came forward for Ward 3 or Ward 2 that is not in an affected community, there is money to fund those projects, correct?
Correct. So there is currently a balance of $2.6 million between so the money needs to be held specifically in the accounts associated with the agreement. So between the two of them, there's $2.6 million sitting in the accounts. Of that, 1.2 million is dedicated to the reserve, but the rest of it is split between those pots. But certainly, yes, there is money to be handed out to applicants throughout the township as required. We just need to ensure that at some point we catch up with that number that's being shown in deficit right now. Just trying to make sure that okay. So I guess, are there any other questions based on that initial information?
So just to be clear then, there's roughly 1.3 million for Amherst Island and about $400,000 for Odessa Wilton. Those monies exist, they're in the bank. Are they only to be spent in those communities, or are they now rolled over into the township as a whole?
So through the chair, though they are intended to be spent within those areas. So as you are considering applications from those areas, as recipients are taking on work or projects in those areas, the money would first come from those dedicated pots of money before they would be spent from the entire township portion. So that's sort of the explanation of where the balances sit right now. So each time you have a meeting where you're considering applications, you'll be provided with a summary from the finance team as to the amount of money that is available to allocate so that you can consider that when you're making your recommendations. Yeah, so that will be provided in the future. Thank you.
Thank you to the director. Are there any further questions about the financial report? Could I ask for a motion to receive the report? Sorry, moved by Mr. Hertz and seconded by Councillor Parks. And I'll call the. Thank you. Next on the agenda is item 10.2, a report or clerk's division update.
Through the chair, the agenda has enclosed a spreadsheet of the applications or recipients, previous recipients, and whether or not the financial reporting has been received. This is just for your information, and the clerk's office tracks this and will provide you with an updated spreadsheet at each meeting. And I can answer any questions if the committee has any questions.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Do we have any questions about that report as attached in the agenda? I'll just give folks a second to look at it. See a question from Diane.
It's not a question, it's just a comment. When you look at this, you see how these funds are really benefiting the whole community of Loyalist Township, and I think we can be very, very pleased about that.
Yes, I agree, and it's nice to see that the number of applications has been increasing year over year as well. If there are no questions, I'll ask for a motion to receive the report from the Clerk's Division. Moved by Mr. I'm sorry. And seconded by Karen I. And I'll call the question. Item 10.3 on the agenda is ideas from the committee on raising awareness specifically related to the Community Grant Committee webpage and the Community Grants webpage, to which there are links in the agenda. To the clerk's office, what are you hoping for from this discussion?
So sorry, through your chair, we're just looking for any ideas that you guys might have in regards to promoting the grants and their intake, as we have seen an influx since 2022 in regards to the amount of applications we're getting. So really just looking to see what ideas the committee has in regards to getting word out there in regards to these grants that we have available.
And I do know that that staff have done outreach with groups in the community. Could you update us on what's been done with that so far to the director?
Apologies. Sorry. The whole time. Okay, sorry. So updating the website so that the list of past grant recipients is included so that when someone is looking at the possibility of applying, they have an understanding of the types of programs or projects that have been granted in the past. Our communications team has worked extensively on a series of social media blasts, promoting the various intakes, and again, identifying some previous recipients so that people have an idea of the types of projects that have been successful in the past. We also include information about the program on tax inserts and utility bills and our mailings that we do on a regular basis. We have in the past, and I believe we're intending to continue to do this, but on some of the notice boards that we have, whether it's at fire halls or the ferry dock or different things, listed the opportunities and the intake closing dates in those areas. So really, we're just looking to, we as staff have a variety of resources at our fingertips, but we also are looking to some of the community members to see, are there places or opportunities that maybe, as staff we aren't aware of or haven't considered where we could be looking to put the word out a little bit more.
Thank you for that. And does anyone have comments or ideas or questions about this topic? I have a question. Now that the reporting requirement includes photographs of the projects, would we have permission to use those to tell the stories on our social and on the website?
Yes, so the introduction of the recognition protocol and the requirement so on the forms now, all applicants are required to acknowledge that we may use their photos and their stories as part of our outreach activities. So we will certainly be looking to do that both on the website and social media and other avenues moving forward in the future.
Are there any other comments at this time? Perhaps what I'll ask through the clerk's office is that we include this on future agendas in case people do go away and think about it and come up with ideas. So I will ask for a motion to receive the discussion about the webpage and the grants webpage. Right, I'll call the question. Next on the agenda is item 11.1, which is capital grant applications, and there are no capital grant stream applications to review at this time. Item 12.1 is program, event, and grant applications, and there are no program, event, and grant stream or program event stream applications to review at this time. Our next meeting will be on June 18th, 2024 at 3 p.m., and that will be a hybrid model. And that will be to review the intake of applications that are due on June 12th. And now I am looking for a motion to adjourn the meeting at 1:07 p.m.
I motion that we adjourn this meeting.
Moved by Mr. Marshall, seconded by Mr. Rogers, and I'll call the question. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. It was a great meeting.
Thank you.